Well, howdy there, folks. James, Political Friar, coming to you again. Got the Baylor Law hat on, and so we're going to have a legal topic on this one. Specifically, we're going to talk about Eileen Cannon deciding to toss the indictment of Donald Trump for the documents case down in Florida. You will recall that Donald Trump was indicted for mishandling national defense material under the Espionage Act. He took a bunch of documents from the White House, some of which were extremely sensitive, including nuclear plans, it has been reported, but others just slightly less sensitive, like secret talks between him and other world leaders and a number of other things that an adversary of the United States would love to get their hands on. He took them out of the White House, out of the secure government facility, and brought them to his house. He just brought them home. I believe he probably brought them home as souvenirs. I think he's just that guy. He doesn't actually have a sense that, boy, this stuff is sensitive and probably you should treat it carefully. Remember, this is the guy who regularly would take notes and flush them down the toilet in the White House. The archivists pulled their hair out over the way that Donald Trump treated documents while he was president. Why should we expect him to behave any differently once he wasn't president? Well, the reason is taking these national defense information and mishandling it is a felony. It's a federal crime under the Espionage Act. There are a dozen or more people serving time in federal prison for doing precisely what Donald Trump did, and the facts of the case aren't particularly disputed. I mean, how else can you explain the fact that those documents were there in Donald Trump's possession? There is no explanation for that at all that would make it legal, and nonetheless, he is no longer under indictment for that. And that's because Judge Eileen Cannon of South Florida has decided that she doesn't want him to be under indictment. Yeah, if you're looking for political bias in the justice system, you really need to not look at the left. I mean, you can't. There is political bias in the justice system on the left. I think that Donald Trump wouldn't have been indicted in New York except for politics. He would have been indicted for this document case regardless of politics. What he did is pretty brazen. And the idea that he gets away with it because he's privileged, well, that's what happened. You've got an Air Force lieutenant, intelligence officer who put secret documents up on the internet after Donald Trump was indicted, and he's already convicted and serving time. The reason why Donald Trump is not going to go on trial for his mishandling of national defense information is because of who he is. The fact is the justice system is two-tiered, but the tiers aren't left and right. It's powerful and not powerful. Donald Trump is going to get an absolute benefit of every possible doubt because of his privilege, because he is the presumptive and soon to be presidential nominee for the Republican Party. And that bias towards power is what you're seeing. Now, some folks on the left will talk about Eileen Cannon being thankful for Donald Trump for appointing her. And maybe she is, maybe in the back of her mind, but that's not the bias that's actually operating here. The bias that's operating here is if you're going to take a shot at the king, you better not miss. And as we learned a few days ago in a much more dramatic way, the consequences of missing are catastrophic. And so Eileen Cannon gave into her bias to not hold powerful people accountable. And she did everything she could to find a way out of this, to find a way that she didn't have to participate in helping the justice system convict Donald Trump. She was going to find any excuse she could. She started with a special master, a made up out of whole cloth legal idea that got shot down immediately at the 11th Circuit last year, but it had the effect of delaying the trial. And it did. It delayed the trial. It worked. She has been ridiculously slow at ruling on motions, and she's ruled on motions in a particularly strategic way. See, this motion to dismiss the complaint was filed months and months and months ago, and she took an extraordinary amount of time to schedule arguments, and then she took the extraordinary step of allowing non-parties to make oral arguments on the motion. And then she took a long time to write her decision. She made her decision before she even scheduled the hearing. She knew exactly where she was going with this because her bias was towards not holding the powerful responsible. That, and she didn't want to be the person who presided over the conviction, the likely conviction of the candidate running for president of the United States. Now, that second reason, I'm more sympathetic to. I think they both played. I think the bias towards the powerful is the most important bias in our justice system. It's not left and right, guys. You right wingers talking about the deep state in the Justice Department, you got it wrong. There's bias. There's lots of bias in the justice system, but it's for the moneyed and the powerful, not for the left wing or the right wing either. She didn't delay this trial because she's a Republican. She delayed this trial because Donald Trump is powerful. And the idea of a judge sentencing a currently running candidate for president of the United States to prison before that person has lost the election, that's not politically palatable. The judicial branch is a branch of government. And in that is a branch of government, politics are absolutely inescapable. And the Supreme Court has led the way on this decision. They have, through their actions, signaled very clearly to the federal judges handling Donald Trump's cases that they don't want this to go to trial before the election. They want the political process to play out. That's why the Supreme Court didn't grant cert on Jack Smith's emergency motion on the immunity. That's why they remanded the immunity case back to the trial court so that it would take more time to get through it. That's why Eileen Cannon tossed this indictment on a really pretty threadbare idea that the special prosecutor needed to be confirmed by the Senate. So here's the legal analysis. And I can tell you that this has been looked at by more than one federal judge. All the federal judges who have looked at it have come to one conclusion, except Eileen Cannon. Eileen Cannon came to a separate conclusion. Now, they were all district court judges. We don't have strict guidance on this from a appellate court or the Supreme Court. We have some dicta from the Supreme Court, which contradicts Eileen Cannon, but she identified it as dicta correctly and dismissed it. She also had the benefit of a Clarence Thomas concurrence, which suggested that maybe this was a way of going about it. And you wonder whether maybe there was some consultation, in the background about what the Supreme Court's view, or at least one Supreme Court justice's view on this was. We're getting into a little bit of conspiracy theory land. But anyway, it wouldn't shock me if there was a nudge on making sure that this trial didn't happen before the election. So here's the legal theory. The legal theory is, in the United States, if you have a principal officer of the United States, such as the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, and actually U.S. attorneys, they must be confirmed by the Senate. So the president nominates and the Senate confirms for principal officers of the United States. But there's not very many principal officers of the United States. There's about 400. And they turn over with every administration, and they get fired and hired and reconfirmed. And the argument goes that the special counsel statute empowers the president, or I suppose it would have to be the attorney general, to nominate a principal officer. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense because attorney general can't nominate a principal officer. Only a president could. So the statute that says that the attorney general picks the special counsel probably means that's not a principal officer of the United States, right? Because it would have to be the president who would pick it, but you wouldn't want the president to pick his own prosecutor. So what is a special prosecutor? And every court that has looked at this, except for Eileen Cannon's, has concluded that a special prosecutor, special counsel, is a subordinate officer. It's not a principal officer of the United States. It's an officer of the United States, but it's a lesser officer, and this is referenced in the Constitution. It says that the secretaries can appoint lesser officers of the United States, and they can function without confirmation from the Senate. And yet, Eileen Cannon bought a wrong legal argument. I suspect she probably even knows it's wrong in her heart of hearts, but she didn't rule on it because she thought she was making the legally correct decision. She was ruling on it because she was making the politically required decision. The same type of politically required decision that meant the Supreme Court was not going to disqualify Trump from the ballot for 14th Amendment reasons. The courts don't want to get involved that deeply in an election. And you know what? Here's a decent argument that that's a good thing. There's a decent argument that the justice system shouldn't be getting that deeply involved in politics. And this is really good evidence, you right wing nut jobs, that the justice system isn't biased against you. This ruling is enough evidence to have me say, just shut it. Shut it when you say that the justice system is somehow biased against you and for left wingers. It's not. It's biased. But again, it's biased towards power, first and foremost its own, and it realized that it couldn't maintain its power and authority if it got involved in an election. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if Donald Trump shot somebody on Fifth Avenue. I think that the trial would have to happen after this election, because who knows? Maybe the voters will forgive him. And in the end, if you don't want to keep your democracy and rule of law, well, you can vote it away. It's happened before. I just hope it doesn't happen here. Anyway, it's just a thought. Let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. Hit that like button if you could. It really helps people find these videos. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe. You know, these videos come out about once a day, and it's really gratifying for me to know that folks are out there and interested. All right, I'll talk to you soon.